And then I can just shut this off, right?
No, let's make sure it works.
Okay. Hold on, everybody. We're back to trying to live stream these classes so that if it's not enough that you participated once, you get to watch it all over again.
Oh, so it should come up there on our live stream page and also on YouTube. Hopefully I've inputted the right links and I'll see.
Awesome. Thank you, Seth. Okay, so we're live. How wonderful. To everybody who is here and everybody who's going to be watching at another time, let's begin with our bracha for the study of Torah. Baruch atah Adonai.
Eloheinu melech
Asher kitshanu
v'totav
Asok b'divrei.
b'divrei Torah.
All right. Well, let's jump right in. We are in Parshat Lech Lecha. And let me share my screen. Here we go. Okay. I can hear me in Seth's office saying, okay, we're live. So, okay, this is not going to work. I hear myself coming from over there. I'm going to close my door. Hold on a minute. Okay, now I don't have to hear me 5 minutes after I've said something in my right ear. Okay, can everybody see the study guide? Okay, Parshat Lech Lecha. So what is this Torah portion about? This is the beginnings of understanding who Abraham is and what the journey that God demands of him is all about. And of course, anytime that we study Torah, at least the way that I, as you know, teach Torah, is to ask ourselves, how do we make sense of this in our own lives today? How does the Lech Lecha that God called out to Abraham reflect on the Lech Lechas that God may call out to each one of us in our own life? So the sources that I'm bringing you today help us focus on that very aspect of each one of us being called forth by God. So the verse itself, Vayomer Adonai el Avraham lech lecha me'artzecha u'mimoladetcha u'mibait avicha u'mibeit avicha el haaretz asher areka. God said to Abraham, go forth from your native land and from your father's house to the land that I will show you. What strikes you in that verse? What just pops up into your head when you read that verse? Yes, George.
Okay, Lech Lecha. The Lecha seems to be extraneous. In other words, go from the land. Why do you say go to you, which is what Lecha means, which means you're going to be different. You have a different mission from everybody else.
Okay, nice interpretation. So what George is pointing out is the Hebrew in the verse could work just as well if it said, Vayomer Adonai el Avraham lech me'artzecha.
Yeah.
Right? It doesn't need lech lecha. It doesn't need that extra lecha. So George is suggesting that lecha is, say it one more time, George, that extra lecha is?
To you, lech is to you. Now, why would you go to you, from, so it obviously has a whole different additional meaning, excuse me.
Okay,
But
good.
you're going to go there, but you're different. You've got a different mission.
That's it.
You're not
So,
like everybody else, even if you're with everybody else.
okay, so George is suggesting that lecha is implying that Abraham is unique and his mission is unique.
Yeah.
And therefore, like for each of us, our missions are also unique in the world.
Video.
Okay. Any other guesses?
Why do I need to show myself? Let me see.
Why not?
I'm gonna mute you, Neil, just because I
Turn
can
off volume.
conversation. Okay, go ahead, Kathleen.
I think when it says to you, it also means to go to the deeper part of yourself, to the more spiritual part, and know more about your connection to God, that part of you that has a spiritual mission.
Okay, so Kathleen is suggesting that the additional lecha is that the journey is internal as much as it is external. Right? Not only do we travel wherever we travel to, but hopefully as we travel, we also experience for ourselves some kind of internal awakening, some kind of internal understanding, some kind of internal realization that we might not have had we not left, had we not traveled on that journey. Great, Leora.
I see a few things here. It's I'm going away from the Lech Lecha, and I'm getting into Me'artzecha u'melodetcha u'mivet avicha. It tells him like 3 areas where you really have to stay out of. Me'artzecha, fine, it's where you live. Mimoladetcha is where you actually were born, and suggesting maybe they have moved since that he moved where he was born and then moved. And then Mibet Avicha is really loaded because we take with us, the knowledge from our father's home. And we suggest here, forget what you learned over there. It's time for you to learn new things.
Beautiful. Okay. Leora points out something really important in the verse, just as we can challenge ourselves to think, why is it lech lecha, that extra lecha? We can also ask ourselves, why was it necessary for God to say to Abraham, leave your land, your birthplace, and your parents' home? Why all 3, as opposed to just one of those things, or 2 of those things, or different things? And so Leora is suggesting that each one of them signify some aspect of Abraham's identification with his past and present that he somehow needs to let go of and leave. Excellent. Thank you, Leora. Other thoughts on this verse? Yes. Stan?
Well, I think it's more than let go of where your father is. I think it's the importance, it's saying the importance still of where you came from. And for all of us, the importance of where we came from as well as where we're going. We want to remember the past. We want to, the door vador, the generation to generation. You can only do that if you identify with the past as well as where you're going.
So is God asking Abraham to identify with the past, or is God asking Abraham to leave the past?
Well, he may be leaving it, but he has to recognize each of us has a past that we may or may not want to, glorify, you might say, but it's part of our identity no matter what.
Okay, so good. So Stan is potentially arguing here a philosophical challenge in the verse. On the one hand, God is inviting Abraham to leave his past. And yet Stan is suggesting that we can't leave our past, that's an impossibility, and that any journey forward is going to, by necessity, carry with it aspects of our past being. That is just the nature of human journeys. So that perhaps what God is asking of Abraham is an impossibility, or maybe what I hear in Stan's question is the necessity to say it 3 different ways is to emphasize that God really does want Abraham to break from his past. If God didn't, then he may have said just, leave me'artzecha, just leave your land. But the fact that it's your land and your birthplace and your father's house is God basically saying to Abraham, the only way you can become the person you need to be and that I need you to be is if you cut strongly everything that came before. So again, what Stan raises for us is that possibility either way. Great. Any other thoughts on this verse? Yes, Kathleen.
I think it means what we all have to do. We have to go from the things that have bound us, that have blinded us, to God. the things that have tied us up in knots, the traumas that we've experienced, and allow ourselves to experience something new. Let go of the things that hurt us, because that's implied in the, benefit for your own good. I also think it's a difficult challenge, and it asks the question, why is this considered one of the 10 trials that Abraham was called upon to undergo, is because we have to go alone. He's going alone, essentially. Each of us has to travel our path alone and by ourselves, and that can be difficult. He's gonna go to a strange land, they're not his people, even with Lot, there are differences,
Beautiful. Beautiful. Two wonderful, wonderful comments. One is that every journey that we take is one that ultimately is a journey that we need to take by ourselves on our own. And second is sometimes the only way we can move forward and grow is really cutting off, letting go of those things that are holding us back from our past. Any other thoughts on this verse? Anything else that you see in this verse that might be strange? I see one more thing that appears unusual, or that at least pops out at me when I read it. And that is the very end. God says to Abraham, go forth from your land, right? From your birthplace, from your father's house, to the land that I will show you. I'm struck by the land that I will show you. How many of you use GPS when you travel? How many of you put an address into Waze or Google Maps, right? Or in the olden days, how many of you carried that Thomas guide in your car so you knew how to get to wherever it is that you were going, right? Well, here is an example where God is saying, trust me, Abraham, you can't put into your GPS where you're ending up, right? You have to believe. You have to trust. You have to have faith, which goes back to one of the things that Kathleen just said, why this is considered one of Abraham's 10 trials. Because God is inviting Abraham to go from everything that he knows to a place that he doesn't even know where he is going. What kind of planning? Can you imagine if I said to you, pack for the vacation that I'm going to be taking you on? And the first question you're going to ask me is, well, where are we going? So I know how to pack. God says, trust me, figure it out. That's huge. All right, so there's a lot packed into this one verse. Yeah, Judy.
In this description, it shows that we're not alone and that God is with us. And
Oh, wow. That's nice. I didn't even think about that. A fourth piece of this verse. I will show you. In other words, I'm going to be with you to guide you on this journey. You're not alone. Really nice. Beautiful. Wow. I'm telling you, every time I study with all of you, I'm always so amazed at the wisdom that you provide. Okay. So I have, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4 things that we're going to try to talk about today. You also know my style, that I never get to everything that I put out there, but nevertheless,
Right.
Rabbi Elimelech of Grodinsk. Rashi says that the phrase Lech Lecha signifies that God told Abraham to leave for your benefit and for your good. If leaving his home was for his benefit and for his good, why is this considered one of the 10 trials that Abraham was called upon to undergo? Right? Kathleen had just shared with us that this is one of 10 trials. But if it is for a good thing, excuse me, I have the hiccups. If it's for a good thing, how is that an example of a trial? It's a good question. Yeah, Kathleen. And then
because it's hard to remember your faith. It's hard to have faith.
okay, so even when you know that something is for the positive, it doesn't mean that you're not going to get waylaid along the way. waylaid along the way, meaning that the obstacles and challenges that might happen on the process of going on that journey
Yeah.
may lead you to lose faith
Yeah.
in God, in yourself, or whatever else.
Well,
And even if it's for a good thing. Excellent, Judy, and then George.
Well, kind of piggybacking on that, you're going into the great unknown, and so you don't know what's going to happen at all. Even though it's good, when you don't have a map or a plan, it can be unnerving.
Okay, so even when you know it's something that is positive for you, that doesn't in and of itself make it an easy journey, right? Take, for example, chemotherapy for cancer, right? I know we need to do this because it will heal, but that doesn't mean that it's going to be easy, right? Even if it is for our own benefit.
Like
George, and
childbirth.
then Nancy. Yeah, childbirth. That's another good one. Yes.
Yeah, all these wonderful things you're going to get, but then later on it says, well, you're going to be, I don't know, aliens for 400 years in a strange land. I mean, this doesn't sound so good to me, you know.
Well,
All
okay.
these good
Fair,
things, but hey, you know, essentially
fair,
you're going to be slaves in Egypt too. But
fair enough, George, but that's not here yet. We can't
oh,
read ahead because the assumption is that Abraham doesn't know that. In the moment that God is telling him, all that Abraham has is the promise that God says, I will show you. That's it. That's it. Nancy.
I'm not understanding the terminology 10 trials. Is that meaning that there's 10 reasons that he
No.
should?
Thank you. I appreciate the question. Let me clarify. So when the when our tradition, when the rabbis, when the sages read the stories of Abraham in the Bible, they come up with, they divine out of all of Abraham's experiences 10 very specific and unique trials that God put Abraham through to test Abraham to see whether or not he really truly was worthy of being the father of our nation. And so they assign to the various elements of his life's story a trial for each one. So the first trial is this one, when God says to Abraham, Lech Lecha. Another trial is when Sarah's not pregnant and God promises that Abraham's going to be the father of a great nation and he has no children. Another trial is the Akedah, when God says to him, take your son, your only son, the one you love, and bring him up on the mountain to be sacrificed. Another trial is when Abraham has to contend with Sodom and Gomorrah. So each one of these, Nancy, the rabbis count each one of the episodes in Abraham's life. They count as one of the trials that God put Abraham through to test him.
Okay.
Does that answer your question? Okay. So, how does Rabbi Elimelech respond to this? Abraham devoted the whole of his being to God, and all his actions were to the end of fulfilling the will of the Creator. Now here, God has commanded him to fulfill a commandment for his benefit and his good, to test him, to know if his deeds are for his own need, if his deeds for his own need, if even these actions will be for the sake of heaven. Apparently, this is indeed a great trial. All right, what is that saying there? So, what's the trial according to Rabbi Elimelech? Read it again on your own. Here's the way I would frame it. When things go well for you, when life is easy, when you're in a great place and filled with gratitude, in those moments, might it happen that you forget the possibility that God accompanied you in all of those positive things? Like, is it not true with human nature that there's a tendency to reach out to God in moments of great need and forget sometimes when things are going well that God is also there? And in those moments when things are going well and we're, lucky in life, if we hold on to the idea that we're lucky in life and things are going well because God is accompanying us on our journey, might that reframe how we experience each of those moments of joy and gladness? Stan.
Well, it seems to me that for the sake of heaven, it was also could be for the common good of your family, your community, the world, whatever, that it's not that you're doing things because only you benefit, although you know that you do, that the benefit spreads, more. And that's your reasoning, isn't to do it because you just want it.
Great. That's fantastic. In other words, what Stan is adding to the comments just made is when we can consider the bounty in our life is not just for us, but it is to be shared with others. That is keeping in mind that the bounty that we have is for the sake of heaven. For the sake of heaven means living our life with our bounty and our blessings in a way that those blessings and that bounty is shared with everybody else. And when it all is for ourselves, that's when we no longer do it for the sake of heaven. Beautiful, Stan. Yeah, Judy.
I think part of the trial is all the pressure that God is putting on Abraham to do all these things, to be good, all the time, to lead to.
So the trial itself, according to Judy, is when you're in the spotlight and you've been given a gift. How do you use that gift? How do you prove to the one who gave you what they gave to you that you use it wisely?
Right. Live up to God's expectations.
Nice. You're under the microscope all the time. Can you meet the expectations that were set for you? And that is nerve-wracking. And Abraham has to live with the awareness that God is watching him all the time. And is he, right, living to the expectations that God has? Hey, Abraham, I'm sending you on a journey to be the father of a great nation. I'm going to watch over you like a hawk to make sure that you're actually doing that all the time. That in and of itself is nerve-wracking. That's a trial. Love it. Excellent. Excellent. Any other thoughts? Yeah, Stan, and then Lauren.
Well, I wanted to mention that the email that you and Rabbi Vogel sent on election day, I think, is an example of the sake of heaven. It was so powerful to me, and I shared it with the other communities that I'm part of because I thought it was so good.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Stan. Thank you. Appreciate that. So these are, Lauren.
I was going to say there are some people, when they talk and they talk about their good fortune, they always say, thank God. It's just part of their vocabulary. They'll say something and they say, thank God, thank God. And then there are other people who, like I was raised, you don't share your good fortune because you don't want to put the curse on it.
The ayin hara, the
Right.
evil eye.
Don't brag because they could be taken away. So, you're torn between your good fortune and the shoe to drop to take away your good fortune. So,
Nice. Yeah, really. Agreed. Agreed. So he finishes in a similar vein. The author of Chidushei Harim taught, let all your deeds be for the sake of heaven. Even that which you do for the sake of heaven should be for the sake of heaven. So he's suggesting that what does it mean to do things for the sake of heaven? It means to be intentional, to be thoughtful, to commit ourselves to say that we are on this earth because of the grace of God, and we want to live our lives as a reflection of that grace in everything that we do, and to never let a moment pass where we're not aware that our life is a gift, and we need to use that life of ours in a purposefully meaningful way. So sit with that, right? And as you ask yourself, the journey of my life, right? Did I devote myself wholly to my purpose, to my mission? Now, that may not be singular in nature. You may have many purposes, many missions, but did you do it with kavanah? Did you do it with intention? Have you lived your life? Are you living your life? Do you continue to travel on this road in a way that is with full intention and meaning? Are you aware of the divinity that is with you along this journey? That's what these texts are inviting us to contemplate. Yeah, Leora.
It brings me to a thought that even though you can do everything with full intention and putting yourself out there, for the sake of God or doing the right stuff, right things, all of a sudden, people or whoever is around you may notice that, oh no, you didn't. You goofed. It didn't work out. How do you take that? I mean, that's
Well,
if Abraham had to do, always right. I don't know.
it's a really good question. How many of us first, I'm going to answer the question in terms of how we judge Avraham. Then I'm going to answer the question in terms of how we judge ourselves. How many of us have read the stories of the Bible and questioned some of the behaviors that Avraham has engaged in, like giving his wife over to the Pharaoh, right, selling her into prostitution, so to speak, or taking his son Isaac up onto the mountain to sacrifice him and not sharing that story with his wife Sarah? We could easily be critical of Abraham. And Leora is saying that that is part and parcel of life. The journeys that we go on, when we interact with other people, people are going to be curious, they're going to be judgmental, they're going to question, they're going to challenge, and we have to be able to provide meaningful answers. I don't see that as a negativity, Leora. I see that as a gift.
Oh.
I see it as a gift because it keeps me honest and challenges me to ensure that what I'm doing right and with kavanah.
Okay.
I would imagine that Abraham would say to all of us when we challenged him in certain behaviors to either explain why he did what he did or state, you know what, if I could do it over again, I would choose differently. Okay? But that only happens when people are willing to confront one another. That's tochacha. That's rebuke. Now, it should be done in a loving way, but it can still be done. It's when it's done in a non-loving way that it's not very helpful.
Thank you.
Stan, did you just have your hand up?
Well, I was gonna say that we had a chance to ask Abraham himself in the sukkah when he was one of our guests. So,
That's right. And what did he say back to you, Stan?
well, they talk to me all the time.
Okay, good.
They
Good.
really do.
Excellent. All right, Aviva Zornberg. We're jumping to the modern 20th century with this biblical commentator. She says, here begins the journey of Lech Lecha, with its strange order of abandonments. First land, then community, and finally Father's house, with a parenthetical statement that says, Moladetcha, again, the root, leave that which produced you, as one possible realization of its potential. For the first time, a journey undertaken, not as an act of exile and diminution, like Adam and Cain and the dispersed generations of Babel, but as a response to a divine imperative that articulates and emphasizes displacement as its crucial experience. So what is she saying here? What she's saying is this is the very first time in the Bible that somebody is going on a journey, not because God forced them to go on a journey in exile as a form of punishment, but actually as a journey that requires displacement. Like, I have to leave what I know in order to become the person that I can potentially be. Can you think of a moment in your life where that occurred, where you had to leave what you knew? And by the way, this could be physical, emotional, or spiritual journey, where you had to leave, you had to feel yourself in displacement in order to grow into the person you needed to be.
Yeah.
Anybody want to share? Kathleen?
I don't think this is an answer to your question, but I think it's not so much about displacement. It's about second chances and the many different ways that we can leave, go into exile, because that's what this sort of passage is, and that we can leave and we can find a different way to live, a different place, but still honor God as its center. Because it's more than displacement. It's an opportunity and it's a second chance. And even, I mean, you can even look at the banishment of Adam and Eve as, okay, we have a second chance. There's another way to live and we can refine our way back to God, no matter where and how far away we get within ourselves.
Okay, so in other words, exile and displacement are not for you negative terms. Those are, in your mind, opportunities to be able to be given a second chance to grow in a different way.
They're hopeful.
Okay. Anybody else? Can anybody think of a moment in where, for you personally, there was major displacement and that displacement led you to grow differently? Like, were you ever, yeah, Neil. Neil, unmute yourself. You have to unmute, Neil. Can't hear you unless you unmute your computer, Neil. Click the space bar on your computer. or move your mouse up to the corner of your box and click unmute. There you go.
Can you hear me now? Here we go.
Yep, there
Yeah,
you go.
no, when we moved to Israel in 1970, we went for 3 years, and that opened up my eyes a lot about traveling to Israel and gave me a much closer feeling to the land there, and changed my attitude a little bit. So I think that was an important decision at that time.
Great. Great. Sometimes moving massive geographic distances culturally, right, to a different country for a period of time, that's significant displacement that forces us, if we're open to the possibility of growing differently. I remember when a friend of mine decided to make Aliyah and his 3 kids were not happy with him. They were in high school and younger, and all of a sudden their lives were so radically displaced. And if you talk to them now, despite the fact that, they're in the army and being challenged and everything else, they would say 100 times over, best decisions that my parents ever made in terms of shaping who we are today. Lauren and then Nancy.
So what comes to mind is the weekend that my daughter graduated from high school, because I have 2 kids and she's the youngest. And I remember sitting on the stairs just crying because all of a sudden I was not going to have anybody in public school anymore. I was not going to be anybody's everyday mother. And I didn't even know what I was going to be. Like, who was I going to be if I wasn't going to be their mother? And it was such a hard, it was so hard for me to figure out what was going to be my role in anybody's life, because for their whole life I was their mother. And now she was going off to college and he was already in college. And it was so
beautiful. I love that. What a great example of displacement simply in the roles that so defined who we were for so long radically changed. And we didn't know where we were going to go. We didn't know what that was going to lead us to. How Lauren would be able to redefine how she saw herself in the world and in relationship to husband and children. And yet, and that's what I think is striking in the second paragraph. And then I'm going to get to you, Nancy, in a second. Because what does she say in the second paragraph? For what is most striking is the indeterminacy of the journey. We know what's been left behind. We can circle on a map Abraham's beginnings, but the destination is merely the land that I will show you. In other words, we don't know when we're displaced what that journey is going to, where that journey is going to lead us. We don't know the end until we get there. Nancy.
No, for me, it was going from school out into the business world. It's a whole different thing and way of life and new friends and learning new procedures and stuff like that. It's a rude awakening.
It is a rude awakening for so many of us, Nancy. I relate. School is like a bubble. And then all of a sudden you leave that bubble and you have to actually on your own figure out how to assimilate everything that you've just learned into the practical application, where it's never as simple as what the way they taught it to you in school. And you have to now deal not with textbooks, but with people. And it makes it much more complicating. So what a great example, right? Beginning a new job, being fired from a job and having us find a new job, right? The roles that we play in our life and those changes, moving into a new location, all of those. Great. I think I'm going to skip Kedushat Halevi for a moment and go to one of my favorite midrashim in the, related to a Torah story. And it relates to Abraham's journey. So from Genesis Rabbah, God said to Abraham, "Go forth from your native land." Rabbi Isaac said, "This may be compared to a man who was traveling from place to place when he saw a birah doleket, And what is a birah doleket? If you look at my footnote, it means either a burning palace or an illuminated palace.
Mhm.
Now, those are significantly different terms, aren't they? A burning palace or illuminated palace. What's the difference between a burning palace and an illuminated palace, metaphorically speaking, poetically speaking? Stan?
Well, burning infers that it's going to be destroyed, and illuminating infers that you're learning from it and it's going to be beneficial.
Very nice. Beautiful. Any other thoughts? Okay.
I
Yeah,
think
yeah, Lauren?
illuminating, it's like shining from within to the out, and burning, it's like shining, it's burning from out in.
Okay, so one is external and one is internal. Good. Anything else? Okay, let's keep going. Is it possible that this palace lacks a caretaker?
Mm.
In other words, if it's burning, where is the person who should be responsible for putting out the fire? Right? Why is it burning on its own and nobody is there to take care of it? Or if it is illuminated, who is it that is bringing such bright light and shining forth such wisdom into the world? I want to see the source of this. That is Abraham's questioning. The owner of the palace looked out and said, I am the owner of the palace. Similarly, because our ancestor Abraham said, is it possible that the world lacks a caretaker? The Blessed Holy One looked out and said to him, I am the sovereign of the universe. So let's imagine it's a burning palace for a minute. Let's use that definition first. You're walking along, you see a house on fire. What's your immediate reaction? And nobody around. What's your immediate reaction?
You throw water on it.
Is there, so your immediate reaction, Eileen, is what can I do to put out the fire?
Exactly. Wouldn't that be anybody's normal reaction? They don't know it's God or whatever. They just see a fire, they put it out.
So in modern times, could you call 911? Or
That takes too long.
Okay, no, I think Eileen is raising a great response. So in other words, when you see a house burning, you have an obligation to put out the fire. Could we read this, Eileen, as a way of stating that the world in which Abraham encounters on his journey away from his land is one that is burning up, meaning that the world is not a safe place. The world is filled with violence and destruction and loss and pain. And God is saying to Abraham, Abraham, put out the fire. Put out the fire, find the water, and take care of the mess that you see. Could we read this story that way?
You could, but he didn't do a very good job.
Mhm.
It's still a mess. It was always a mess.
Well, what we could say to that comment, Eileen, is you're Abraham. It's your responsibility to put out the fire. You're right. One individual alone is not enough to put out the fires of this world. Therefore, each one of us is on a journey to put out the fires, including you and me and everybody else here. And we are judged and evaluated on whether or not we've contributed to putting out the fire or walking away and ignoring it. Good. Really nice. Any other way which we could understand this? Yes, Dan?
Well, I could say that the journey that I took was on the March of the Living that went to Poland and to Israel, that the fire, the best thing that happened in the next years after the Holocaust was the state of Israel, which we hope is putting out the fire. Actually, there's fires there, but it's certainly something to, to that it can be also part of our own, own being.
So, okay, so what Stan is suggesting is not as so much about saving the palace that's burning. It's that even if you can't save the palace that's burning, that doesn't mean that you can't rebuild that palace somewhere else. Right? If the Holocaust was an expression, a clear indication of the destruction of the Jewish people, then the obligation after the Holocaust is to rebuild that Jewish community, wherever it may be, in Israel, in America, in Canada. And what does it mean to rebuild? How do we rebuild it? How do we make sure that that which was burnt is not lost forever? Excellent, Stan. Great. How else? Anybody else?
Yeah.
If it is, I want to switch from the burning palace to the illuminated palace. How do you understand this as an illuminated palace? Abraham looks at this palace that's illuminated and says, wow, right? Is there a caretaker for this palace? And God says, I am the caretaker for this palace. What does that exchange mean if you frame it from a palace of illumination? What does that mean, a palace of illumination? An illuminated palace. What does Abraham see on his journey that he didn't see when he was left alone at home, still in, the confines of the world in which he was born?
He's the light
What is that light?
of God.
What is that light of God? What does that mean?
Well, then he sees the light in everybody. That's the light of God.
Okay, so you're suggesting that what Abraham is able to see outside of the confines of the world that he lives in is there is divinity in everything. And that seeing that divinity in everything and everybody might force him to act differently in the world than the way he acted before. Judy?
I see it as an abundance of possibility.
Say more.
Well, being in his own little space and where he grew up and then with his family and everything, you don't see everything the world has to offer and other people have to offer and what you have to offer. And when you get out there, it opens you up.
Very nice. When we live in a small box, we assume that everything in the world is like that small box that we live in. And only when we get out of that box do we recognize and see that there are many different ways and many different gifts and many different possibilities for how to live one's life. But it takes us getting out. And the illumination that Abraham sees is like, I was so narrow in my views. And now I'm no longer so narrow in my views. Now that I've been exposed to the larger world, that inevitably changes how I want to be with the larger world. Great. Love it. Kathleen.
I was thinking along those lines, that it showed him that there was an interrelatedness between all things in the universe. So it goes with, not being narrow-minded anymore, but seeing that everything contributes and everything is interrelated, including the people. And therefore, it speaks to not doing an in-group and an out-group, but seeing how can we harmonize with other groups. And
Nice.
so continue the illumination and enhance the illumination.
So everything is connected, Kathleen is suggesting. Everything's connected, the butterfly effect. And once we recognize that everything is interconnected and interrelated, what's my responsibility to assuring the proper workings of all those interconnected parts? That's the light that he sees. Nice. George.
Yeah. Sometimes if you're not well grounded and you have unlimited choices, you're likely to pick the wrong choice. We go out into this wide world and we hook on to something that's really bad. That happens all the time, for Jews. Well, we don't need this, why keep kosher? Why do this? Why do that? It's more fun, and you go on and you go on a different path, and you kind of disappear from the ranks. When you have a lot of choices, are just opening up to the outside world isn't necessarily a good thing. Very often, probably more often, it's bad.
So is that an expression of the burning palace or the illuminated palace?
Well, I wasn't even thinking in those particular terms, but again, you were talking about opening yourself up to, and okay, I get that, but unless you're grounded, most of the choices are bad that we have today.
So I'm holding on to everything you said except for that last comment. Most of the choices that we have today.
Right. Okay. You go to college, you want people to go a certain way, with Judaism, and, interact with the world, that's fine. But then you run into all kinds of choices. And again, most of them are bad.
So I don't know. I don't know enough to be able to evaluate to say most of them are bad. I think
you do.
A choice is a choice. There's lots of choices out there. They're only bad if they're potentially taken to the extreme.
Okay, well, let me just go. Okay, there's drugs, there's sex and all that.
Drugs
anti-Israel. There's
drugs are not bad in and of themselves.
No, but they can destroy you, and
of course, and anything can destroy you.
Yeah.
Anything destroys. So it's not.
Or you learn that Israel isn't so good. You quote learn. You pay $400,000 to go to a fancy school, and you learn that everything you believed in was wrong, which of course it isn't, but that's what you learn there. There's all kinds of, or you meet a nice person of a different religion, and and you go that way. A lot of things can go wrong, so to speak.
So what's the solution? So the solution if I'm hearing George correctly, the solution is that Abraham should not have left his home.
No, he was leaving a bad place. Say that he was leaving idol worshiping. But what if somebody leaves Judaism to go on a different journey? Just the fact you're leaving your home is not always good, and very often bad. Depends on what you're leaving and what you're going to. That should be the issues.
But the issue is just because you're staying in Judaism, the bad choices are still there anyway. You still could have drugs. You still could.
No, I understand all that, but there's all kinds of other routes one can take, that are presented to you, and quite honestly, most of them are bad. Okay.
Leora?
I disagree big time, because you don't have to go to college.
I understand that.
In order to find bad things in your life, or
of course, yeah. But I'm just saying that most of the choices that our kids are presented with, we all have, talk about this. You wouldn't want them to take those choices, okay?
But that again is the point of view, because I can say, since I came to United States, I am a different person. I learned the good things that I did not know about from before, and many bad things. But I was exposed to bad things over there in Israel as a young person, but I did not make the choices to go that way.
So I appreciate what Lior is saying, right? There's always choices before us. And the part of the journey that, these texts are inviting us to consider are, as we move into a world that is so vast and so open with so much possibility in front of us, how do we maintain the first thought that we began with today, that whatever it is that I'm doing it for the sake of heaven.
Right.
That I continue to frame my journey through the recognition that there's a higher purpose and a cause for what it is that I am moving on. And if I can hold on to that, right, I'm going to be put to the test. There's going to be lots of things in my life where I am going to potentially choose wrong. But even in those wrong choices, can I go back to, I'm doing this for the sake of heaven, to bring me back to the ultimate end of where I want to get to in this journey, right? That's really the lessons of Lech Lecha.
And I think we can easily forget, according to Jewish theory, that we're put here for a purpose. We have a mission, all of us, to further Hashem, Judaism, all the above, all the good things in the world. And the opportunities we see very often are not going in that direction. They're going in a quite different direction.
But again, George, I want to interfere and say that many people, I'm talking about Jewish people, doesn't matter if they're Israelis or American, many people say our lifestyle here, Mike and I, they don't appreciate the fact that we belong to a shul. Oh, wow, almost 40 years you belong? What a fiery you are. Rabbi, you will tell them.
Yeah, well, they're wrong. They're wrong.
I don't know if they're wrong.
Well, I say they are.
It's wrong for them, but it's right for me.
No. They're
all right.
They have forgotten their mission.
We're gonna
That's what I'm
pause.
gonna say.
We're gonna pause the debate. We're gonna pause the debate, and we're gonna say that there are many paths that one can take, and I believe that to counter George's pessimism, I think there are many people that take absolutely beautiful paths and continue to grow in those paths. And hopefully all of us will continue to recognize that the journeys we're on, we are on for the sake of heaven, and that the things that we do because we want to hold on to that belief that there is an ultimate purpose in our life. So I, again, enjoy learning with all of you. And I will see you either next week or the week after, back here again. So a good week ahead to all of you. Take care.
Shalom.
Okay.
Shabbat shalom.